Good evening. Tonight's discussion, 5-speed or manual versus automatic. Now, considering there are 5-speed, 6-speed transmissions, and then you've got your automatic transmissions. It's all about preference, clearly. And if you're racing, then it would be which one is easier. Now, granted, you got both transmissions that are, used for racing. You got your 2-speed Power Glides, you got your Jerichos, you got your, half of these transmissions I don't even think they even use anymore because they've come up with some new stuff. Granted, I don't race, so I don't have the rundown on what's used. I really don't even watch that stuff too much anymore because I'm a street car guy and I don't have the need to buy anything like that, so I don't have the info on it. What I do know is that you can get a decent 5-speed or a decent 6-speed and put it in a street car. Granted, you can still buy Magnums, 6-speeds that'll handle 600 to 700 horsepower, and I guess you can get one that's prepped to handle even more than that if you got turbos or those kinds of things on your car, and that's great. I mean, the fact that we've graduated to being able to have a transmission that'll handle horsepower. But the question of the day is which do you prefer? Now, granted, the ease of just getting in, putting it into gear, and just taking off, and it just doing its thing. Nothing really wrong with that. Here's the picky part. All right, back in the day, back in my pop's day, and probably some of your granddad's day, you didn't buy an automatic. Number two, it cost more. So, standard, which is what it was called, standard transmission, which was usually a 4-speed or even a 3-speed on the tree, was normal. You wanted an automatic, you had to pay more to get it. Now, granted, that's not the norm these days. The norm is an automatic. You have to pick a certain type of car to even get a standard or a manual transmission. Because back then, everybody was used to shifting their own gears. It was normal. Even women. Now, for those who weren't used to or didn't want to shift gears and it was an option, they would pay the extra money to get the automatic. It probably wasn't in a performance car, and even if it was, they didn't drive it like that. They just wanted to get in it and put it in gear and just go on. They didn't want to shift any gears, and you had 3 on the tree, and that really wasn't a performance application. I wasn't alive then, so I can't say there weren't people who could drive a 3 on the tree like it was an automatic. I don't really know, but I don't really see the 3 on the tree holding up in a fast shift situation. So 3 on the tree was okay for just your regular mundane driving or in a farm truck, which is most of the 3 on the trees were in pickup trucks. There were some cars that had 3 on the trees, but most of the examples that I've seen were in pickup trucks. But not to say there wasn't 3 on the tree in cars, because there was. But the idea of it is if you were going to get a muscle car, your GTO, your Cuda, Mustang, your Camaro, your Firebird, your Trans Am, your Dodge Super Bee, your Coronet or Roadrunner or whatever. Any of these cars, you didn't get an automatic. You just didn't. You didn't buy a muscle car with an automatic in it. Granted, they made fun of you if you did. You know, they'd be like, "Is that your mother's car? That can't be your car. That must be your sister's car." "Oh, I know. That's your grandmother's car. Because you wouldn't never buy an automatic. That's just sissified. If one would even call it that. I mean, they know they had other words. They'd pick on you and call you all kinds of colloquialisms, which meant that you were less than manly for buying an automatic. Now, if that was your parents' car, or you could lie, say, "Yeah, it's my grandmother's car. It's her grocery getter. She drives it to church meetings and to the grocery store." But even back then, you had grandmas that could outshift you stoplight to stoplight in a 4-speed car. They didn't make grandma songs, a little old lady from Pasadena. They didn't make those songs for nothing. These were like realistic things that happened. Shocking, but they made more powerful cars then, and they were fun to drive. Now, fast forward to today. All right. You have the option. Now, granted, we'll keep the discussion on a performance car level. I could care less if your BMW 5 Series has a manual or an automatic in it, because number one, most of those guys that own those cars don't drive fast. They're just not concerned, unless it's an M car. And I think even then, those cars are going to paddle shift. They're not going to a manual shift option. I even heard that Porsche was talking about getting rid of the manual transmission. And I'm like, now granted, I don't own a Porsche. I don't see anything wrong with Porsche. I've never driven a Porsche. I think that they've got some cool looking stuff. It's expensive, but it's Porsche. They've been around since the turn of the century. I mean, you can't take nothing away from them. But at the same time, they were known for being a driver's car. Why would you take the manual transmission away from that car? That's what made it. That's what made the car what it was. It's pure driving experience. Because Porsche, that's what Porsche was. And they're talking about getting rid of it. And I'm like, okay, you're going to get rid of that, and you're going to be like BMW and go to this electronic thing with the buttons on it. That is just lame. I mean, you get in a car that makes 500-600 horsepower, and it's supposed to be excellent handling, you know, the ultimate driving machine, that kind of thing, and you can't shift your own gears. I mean, people have gotten lazy. They don't want to shift their own gears anymore. There's no excitement in that. I mean, now granted, let's be realistic. If you're in a Camaro or a Mustang or a Challenger, we use those 3 cars because they all come with the manual option, 6-speed transmission. When you're shifting from one gear to the next, that's where the joy is. You can control the revs. You can rev it up. You can rev match it. You can do all these things because that transmission will go into whatever gear you put it in. It ain't picking the gears for you. And, you know, most of these people will complain about automatic transmissions shifting too early, shifting too late, not shifting firm enough. Shifts are soft, you know, and you got to remember, the reason why that happens is because within the computer of this car that goes to that automatic transmission, it's about longevity. It ain't about performance and getting the most out of it. It's about longevity. And whatever they deem the longevity should be for that transmission, they're going to make the shifts, the shift points in it, very soft natured and as less as harsh as possible on the drivetrain, which is not going to be the same if you're dumping the clutch in a Camaro or a Mustang or a Challenger. Not going to be the same. So, yeah, they're going to diminish your fun level. And then I don't even think they offer the option of, you being able to do different things with it. Now, granted, you got your traction control and and all these other features that go with it. But in a car that's rather expensive, and it basically does everything for you, it's probably gonna take some of the fun out of it. Aside from maybe some spirited canyon driving, driving through the mountains and that kind of thing, and you can get it going pretty good, but you're not doing any heavy downshifting or anything like that. But aside from they're gonna show you in the commercial, and they used to do that. They don't do that anymore. If you notice that too, in most of your car commercials, you don't see them beating on the car anymore. They used to beat on them. I mean, they'd go around the track, and I think in some of the Porsche, older Porsche commercials, they would show it, doing highway speeds and, you being able to downshift it and, drop a gear and disappear, that kind of thing. They don't too much do that anymore. Most of the proverbial Porsche owners, from what I've seen, they're doctors, they're old men, and they don't really drive fast. So if Porsche was to get rid of the manual, they still sell cars. I mean, their target audience is people who don't want to shift. So if you've only got 5% of their base customer who wants to shift gears, or he plans on taking his car to the track and he wants to shift gears, whether he buys a GT3 or GT3 RS car he's going to cup race with it, or he's going to race in a certain class, yeah, he can order that car with a manual transmission, but for the most part, they want to just do away with it. As far as your Mustang goes, it's enthusiast driven. They know where their bread's buttered at. They're the same thing. Now, you thought the same thing with Dodge and Chevrolet, but seeing as they murdered off the Challenger and the Camaro, you don't have anything to buy except for a Mustang that would have a manual transmission. Now, I don't know. I think that BMW is offering in their M2 and M3 platforms, you can probably get a 6-speed transmission. I'm pretty sure if you wanted to pay enough for it, and those cars are astronomical in price. But from what I've gathered, the performance is there. If you want to order a manual, you can get one. I think the option is still there, that you can go into a dealership and say, hey, this is what I want, because you're going to pay for it. And they say, well, we don't offer that. What do you mean you don't offer it? Same thing with the GT500. The GT500, the biggest, baddest Mustang they make doesn't offer a manual transmission. It's automatic. That's kind of lame. You can get the Dark Horse with a 6-speed. You can get the GT with a 6-speed. But why not offer the GT500 with a 6-speed? Don't know who came up with that marketing faux pas, but hey, people still bought the car. I mean, it makes 760 horsepower, it's supercharged, and it works. It works on the track. So, me personally, I'd rather have a manual standard. Now, the 65 is standard, is automatic. But when I bought the car, I didn't buy it because it was an automatic. I bought it because it was old, and I like the old cars. Now, I could swap a 5-speed or a 6-speed into it. Preferably it'd be a 5-speed, because the car is not powerful enough to need a 6 gear. It's just not. It's got a 306 in it. It might make 300. It really isn't even about how much power it makes. It's all about just to drive. But nothing wrong with overdrive. And that's what that would be if it had a T5 or a TKO in it. That extra gear to give it the overdrive and drop it down to highway speeds, and you can just cruise 70, 80, whatever. That's really all it's about. Now, granted, the suspension and all that under the 65 isn't, up to par for any spirited driving. I'd literally have to start replacing stuff under it. But it's just about probably more of a visceral sound and being able to shift your gears going down the street, stoplight to stoplight, because it'll be kind of loud, and it's all about just being loud and attention getting. Shifting gears is just more fun. There's nothing wrong with the automatic that's in it. It's a 3-speed, I think. 3-speed automatic. Granted, it's mundane. It's a mundane experience, blah, blah, blah. There it is. Here we are. And then it's, whatever RPM range it's in, once it hits 3rd gear. That's pretty boring, but you got to remember, back in 1965, the speed limit was 55 miles an hour or less. That was on the highway. 55 miles an hour. I mean, when I bought the car, I drove it home doing 70 miles an hour. Drove it all the way from Knoxville back here. So it's not like the cars wouldn't run, even with a 3-speed in there, and it wasn't winded out either. It was pretty level, just humming along. But it'd be a whole lot cooler with a 5-speed in it. Now, granted, vanilla is a 5-speed car. It was an automatic when I bought it, and I swapped it out. So I prefer standard transmission or manual to an automatic transmission. I don't think there's any drawbacks to it. Now, granted, you would have people say, well, what about if you're in a traffic jam? Well, if you're a standard kind of guy, it doesn't really bother you because you're used to driving a standard car. So even in a traffic jam, if you ain't got a super heavy clutch in it, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. If it's a car you drive every day, which I've had plenty of them, I drove every day and I never had any problems. Never brought up any clutches. My knee didn't ache from being in a traffic jam, stopping and going. I never had any problems. So the manual would be what I would choose. Now I get it why some older guys don't want to drive the manual. Is because they get older and their knees get bad. And you do realize they make adjustable clutches, and so you can adjust the pedal height and all of that, which is what I did in the black car. I went to an adjustable clutch, and I made it. It's like butter. You put your foot on it, and it hits the floor. It's that easy. It's so easy. Your grandma could get in it and drive it. But you got these newer cars, and they've got dual clutch setups, which makes that a little bit more challenging, a little stiffer, It engages a little quicker, so you let up off of it and it takes off. You just gotta get in it and drive it and figure out how far the pedal travel is before the car actually starts to move. But it's a learning curve just like anything. Aside from the automatic, which you don't do anything. You just get in it, turn it and turn the key or push the button, and half of them don't even have a motion where you pull them back or push them forward. They have buttons now. General Motors products have buttons. They got the D, the R, the N, and then the P, the park. So you don't even have a shifter anymore. Now you've got buttons. They're going to the buttons in some of these other products. So they're doing away with the shifter altogether. There's no shifter on the column. There's no shifter on the floor. It's just got buttons on the dash that you're pushing. Trust me, that's a whole nother problem. It's a whole nother problem in itself. And you would think in an industry where they like to make things easy, they're just making it's more complicated. And when those things go bad, they're just more complicated. And it's going to be the consumer who's going to have to say something. You're going to have to say, look, man, these buttons on the dash are garbage. This whole thing where I get in the car and I push the button and I push a D button or R button or P button and to get the car to move, it's dumb. I'd rather have a nice shifter that just makes me feel comfortable. I put my hand on it and I can shift it in a gear. I'm all about the experience. I think that's why the majority of these guys who buy newer cars enjoy driving an old car so much, because it's a visceral experience. It's the sound of the car. They get to shift the car themselves. It's more fun to drive it. Granted, you could have a brand new GT500, but I bet you'd have more fun riding in a 1967 GT500 with a 4-speed in it. I'm just saying. It's a visceral experience. Yeah, the new car makes 760. Sometimes it's not about all the power. Because you know what? How fast can you drive on the street? Exactly. You're only going to be able to have so much fun in that car before somebody is trying to shut you down. Now, in an old car, you can have all the fun you want because they don't think it's very fast. Unless it just sounds nasty, then they know better. Then you're bringing attention to yourself. But other than that, you can have a good time. Personally, I don't. If I had my choice, it ain't going to be an automatic. Now, if the car just has an automatic, and I can deal with that. My preference is an automatic, though. I prefer standard straight shift car. I just think they're more fun. And if you are on the same page that I am, and you think the standard is more fun, leave a comment. We can hash this discussion out. If you think that, I personally think the manual is better. You know, not better in a way that. Now, granted, you're gonna have guys argue with you all day long. Now, in a racing sense, I've never raced, driven a race car down a track as far as the automatic thing goes, and I get it. Basically, they just put it in gear and they pull up there. If we're in a drag racing scenario, and it turns green and they stomp it, and it does its own thing. It's they're saying that in that kind of a race, the automatic's gonna win because you don't have to wait. Now, you've got guys who have a transmission in their cars. Now, I've just now seen this. Guys are starting to put NASCAR transmissions in their street cars where they're no lift shift, which means you shift it without lifting. After first gear, you just go through the gears. I don't know if that's if you can get that in a drag race scenario, but I also heard stories from my old man where you had guys who could shift a manual transmission and it sounded like an automatic. They were so fast and so good at it, you couldn't tell it was a manual car. I don't know if you have anybody around that can still do that. I've heard there was a fella, I think he still races. He had a Nova, had a straight six in it now. This dude's some kind of phenom when it comes to building straight six motors. And he was supposedly really good at driving 4 speeds. And he would actually break the shifter handle off of him because he would snatch it so hard. And I also heard he never used the clutch. Once he got out of first gear, he just throw it in the gear. And he was so good at it, it was like an automatic. I don't think there's anybody with that type of skill on the roads or even driving a car like that now. And I don't even think that the equipment they make now would even hold up to that kind of punishment. Granted, you got to remember, back then you had Muncie rock crushers. And the reason that they call it a rock crusher is because if it had straight cut gears, you could drop a rock in it and it would grind the rock up. That's what I heard. But, you know, those were the days. We don't have that kind of stuff now. So we have to work with what we got. Aside from that, me personally, manual transmission. Nothing wrong with the automatic, but if I had to get one, it'd be a manual car all day long. The whole preference of that's your mother's car, that's your grandmother's car, yeah, might need to start bringing that back. But then again, you got youngsters who ain't never even seen a manual, can't drive a manual. You know, you got car thieves trying to steal people's cars, and they get in it and it's got a stick in it, and they're like, how do I get this thing in gear? That'd probably be one reason why everything I'd have would be a manual. You ain't stealing nothing out of this yard unless you can drive a stick. And most of the car thieves now, they're young and dumb. They can't drive a stick. They get in and they can't even get it out of gear. They used to just the automatic. But hey, that's what we're dealing with these days. So, leave a comment what your preference is. I just think that if you got some kind of performance car, I mean, you like having an automatic, or do you like a 5-speed or a 6-speed? I mean, how fun would a Viper be if it had an automatic in it, or even a Ford GT? And I'm not talking about the new one, which it's got a whatever it's got in it, which it's probably paddle shifted. It doesn't have but that's a race car. You know, it's a $400,000 car and over. If you just got that kind of money. But the 2004 and 2006, they actually had shifters in them. Those cars were something. But like I said, your preference, leave it in the comment. I know what I like. I know what I'm all about, and it's purity. The purity of it. I think a muscle car is pure when it's got a 4-speed in it, or even a 5-speed. Or if you got the money for a 6-speed. Shifting gears in it. Doing your own diligence, you know. Rolling through those gears. That's what I think. Leave a comment. Next video, we will be discussing possibly the future of the car culture. I'm gonna give it some thought. I got a couple other topics I'm working on, but yeah, leave a comment in the comment section. Got a few comments on the last couple of videos, and that was pretty good. I like the feedback. Lets me know people are watching and they're thinking about these things. It keeps the hobby alive and keeps the brain going, you know, keeps the brain waves moving. So we'll catch you on the next one. We'll talk about the next topic and see where we go from there. Got some interesting stuff coming, so Stay tuned. Keep between the ditches, and I'll catch you people later.